U.S. for the medium to long term, but I think we're still at severe risk of having subpar growth and especially sluggish job growth.
Thanks to both of you for being here this morning, and thanks for your calls, your tweets, and your emails. You have a great weekend.
The prayer will be offered by guest chaplain Reverend Dr. Janet Whaley Zimmerman, St. Patrick's Episcopal Church, Washington, D.C.
Almighty God, we ask your blessings today on those who have achieved every measure of societal success and on those who have lost their jobs, their homes, and are in danger of losing their hope. We ask you to bless those who have received the best education available in this country and those who try to learn in overcrowded classrooms. And we ask you to bless those who enjoy the freedom and security of this great nation and those who are daily in harm's way fighting wars overseas. We ask you to inspire our leaders, give them discerning hearts and agile minds so that together they may shape laws that work for the common good. Equip them to fulfill the challenging duties that you have given them to do, and help them always to lead with compassion and generosity. In the name of God, whom I know through Jesus Christ. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Chair will lead the House in the Pledge of Allegiance. Say it again. The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, Sir. This is to notify you formally, pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, that I have been served with a subpoena issued by the United States District Court for the Central District of Illinois for documents in a civil case. After consultation with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that compliance with the subpoena is consistent with the privileges and rights of the House. Signed sincerely, Aaron Schock, Member of Congress.
The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, Sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I have the honor to transmit a sealed envelope received from the White House on October 19, 2011 at 11:56 a.m. and said to contain a message from the President whereby he transmits a notice concerning the national emergency with respect to significant narcotics traffickers central in Colombia. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas, Clerk of the House.
The Clerk will read the message.
To the Congress of the United States, Section 202D of the National Emergency Act, 50 U.S.C. 1622D, provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, prior to the anniversary date of its declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. In accordance with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register for publication the enclosed notice stating that the emergency declared with respect to significant narcotics traffickers centered in Colombia is to continue in effect beyond October 21, 2011. The circumstances that led to the declaration on October 21, 1995 of a national emergency have not been resolved. The actions of significant narcotics traffickers centered in Colombia continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, and cause an extreme level of violence, corruption, and harm in the United States and abroad. For these reasons, I have determined that it is necessary to maintain economic pressure on significant narcotics traffickers centered in Colombia by blocking their property and interest in property that are in the United States or within the possession or control of the United States persons, and by depriving them of access to the U.S. market and financial system. Signed, Barack Obama, the White House, October 19, 2011.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. The Chair lays before the House the following communications.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on October 18, 2011 at 11:23 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 1721, Senate 275. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas. The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on October 19, 2011 at 10:15 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 925, that the Senate agreed to Senate Concurrent Resolution 32, that the Senate passed Senate 270, Senate 292, Senate 333, Senate 334, Senate 404, that the Senate passed without amendment H.R. 489, H.R. 765. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas. The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on October 20, 2011 at 10:50 a.m. that the Senate passed Senate 894. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas. The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on October 20, 2011 at 5:42 p.m. that the Senate passed Senate 1412, that the Senate passed without amendment H.R. 1843, H.R. 1975, H.R. 2062, H.R. 2149. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
Without objection, the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday next.
House returns on Monday for legislative work. And just a note, news reports indicate this morning that President Obama has signed the free trade agreement bills with Korea, Panama, and Colombia.